Hello everybody, welcome to our third video from the Florence Nightingale mentoring program. If you haven't joined the mentoring program, please simply just register on the link below. For this video, we're excited to be introducing one of King's most prominent thought leaders in midwifery, Professor Cathy Warwick. So Cathy was awarded a CBE for services to healthcare and elevated to DVE in 2018. She was the Director of Midwifery and General Manager for Women and Children's Services at King's College Hospital for 10 years and the CEO of the Royal College of Midwives until September 2017. Today, she is non-executive director of Kingston Hospital NHS Trust and chair of the British Pregnancy Advisory Service and a visiting professor at King's College London and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Cathy has written and published widely on midwifery issues and lectures and speaks all over the world. The list goes on, but let's hear from Cathy herself. Over to you, Cathy.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here, and I'm really pleased to be asked to talk to you today. As Sophie says, I retired as the Chief Executive of the Royal College of Midwives last September, but I'm still busy and still involved, and I may well have lectured some of you who are studying midwifery at King's, because I'm an honorary prof at King's, a great institution, and I hope you're enjoying your course. Sophie mentioned that I was a general manager and director of midwifery, and that was at King's College Hospital, which some of you may be doing your clinical experience at. So I hope you're enjoying yourselves. Anyway, I guess the thing is that I've been in nursing and midwifery specifically for a very long time. It's 46 years now since I qualified. 46 years since I qualified as a nurse and 45 since I qualified as a midwife. And I guess what I did want to start by saying to you is how much I have enjoyed my career and how brilliant I think it is that you are studying nursing and midwifery. I think the important thing is you're entering a profession where you really do have a guaranteed job, but that in itself perhaps wouldn't be enough. I think what you have is a range of opportunities in front of you. You know, you can really decide what it is you enjoy, and you may have to work a little bit at it, but in my experience, there's something for everyone. You know, you can go off and be an academic, you can be a researcher, you can be a clinical nurse, clinical midwife for the rest of your career if that's what you want. You can go into management, you can go into teaching, or indeed you can combine things. I have some very good young friends who are young midwives, and they're doing a couple of days in research, a couple of days perhaps as one of them is a lactation consultant, helping women to breastfeed. So I think, remember, even when times are tough, you're going into a brilliant profession, and the world, quite frankly, is your oyster. And when I say that, that's another opportunity, isn't it? To take your qualification and go and work overseas and then come back again. So never a dull moment. I've certainly never had a dull moment in my career. And like all of you, you know, I've had the brilliant patches and I've had the rough patches, and I've had some rough patches. And I do hope that I can give you some tips for how to get the best out of everything, but also how to cope when things are getting tricky. So I was brought up in Scotland. My dad was a doctor and my mum was a nurse. So you could have said that perhaps going into nursing was in my blood. I'm not sure that's strictly true, but I've got a lovely picture of myself dressed up in a little nurse's uniform when I was about 4. So I like to think I kind of always wanted to go into this profession. But I had a bit of a problem because my dad wanted me to go to university because I had the qualifications. And of course, at that time, nursing was not a degree subject. But luckily for me, they had just started to introduce degree courses. It wasn't the normal way of studying nursing, but a few people could do it that way. So I please my dad and please myself, which is always a win-win, isn't it? And having grown up in a village in Scotland, I went off to Edinburgh University and started my degree nursing course. And I absolutely loved that. I mean, I guess very much like university courses now, the focus of the degree nursing course at Edinburgh was very much about society, about how we actually deprive people of their health or in fact enhance people's health. It was very much focused on the person, on holistic care, and very much focused on things like health, disease prevention, rather than always having to worry about cure. So it fitted very nicely with the subsequent sort of philosophy that surrounds midwifery, which is obviously where I ended up. So a great course. But I did also learn something very important when I was on my degree course. And that was that, unfortunately, particularly then, but I think it's still true today, nursing and midwifery are very hierarchical professions. And I think they tend to look at kind of what uniform you've got on or what title you've got on, rather than what you can do and what you can contribute. And when I was at Edinburgh, because we were the degree nurses and spent quite a lot of time in university, we kind of whizzed through the clinical experience quicker than the other nurses. And you got different belts depending on which year of clinical experience you were in. And the sort of top belt was the red belt, which the nurses doing the normal course got their red belts once they were in their third year. But us degree students actually got red belts when we were in our fourth year. But at that point, we'd done less clinical nursing than the 3-year nursing students. And I found that really difficult because everybody was going, well, you're the red belt, you know what to do. And I was thinking, but you guys have got green belts on, but you're much better nurses than me. And I think one of the things I learned there is that hierarchy isn't helpful. And throughout my career, I've really tried to, I wouldn't say undermine hierarchy, but I've tried to look at people for what they are and what they're able to do, rather than look at them and think, oh, she's got a great title, therefore she's top of the tree. And I would really encourage you as young nurses or young midwives to not be, intimidated by hierarchy. And if you feel you want to do something and you feel you can contribute something, speak up. And equally, if you think you should be able to do something because you're more experienced than someone else, but you don't know how to do it, also speak up. There is no shame in admitting that you cannot do something. And the fact that you're in your third year as a student may still mean that you've just not had the experience that someone in their second year has. So throughout my career, I've very much tried to eliminate taking action just on the basis of hierarchy. But generally speaking, I loved my nursing training, and I look back on it now, and I'm so pleased that I did a degree, and I think I was so privileged to do a degree at that time. And it's one of the things I would defend to the absolute end, is that nursing and midwifery should both be degree professions. And there are people who say, oh no, we can learn these, just in the clinical, these wonderful subjects, just in the clinical areas. I personally think the thinking, the thought processes that are needed, the decision-making processes, that's degree level, and we must keep our nursing and midwifery in the UK as degree courses. However, having said that, why did I do midwifery? So I qualified as a nurse, and I very quickly decided I was going to train as a midwife. And that was partly because I did just want to do a more practical based course, and I wanted to do it the same way everybody else did. I was also coming to live in London. I was following a man who has been my husband for almost as long as I've been a nurse and a midwife, and he was working in London. So that's perhaps another point I want to make is everybody says, oh, what do you want to do in life? Where are you going to live? What are you going to work at? What's your pathway to success? Quite frankly, I think most decisions get made for coincidental reasons. I never really had a career trajectory. I nearly always did things for all the wrong reasons rather than the right reasons. I mean, even my last job when I was becoming CEO of the Royal College of Midwives, I'd never have applied for that job, really. I was perfectly happy in the job I was doing. But one of my friends would not leave me alone until I'd put in the application form. And so I only got that job because somebody pestered me. It's very interesting. So I wouldn't be intimidated by people who ask you what your career plans are all the time. I think it's perfectly acceptable not to have anybody, but always grab opportunities. And I feel that's what I've done throughout my career ever since I was a young student, is grab opportunities. So I came down to London, I did my midwifery training. I really enjoyed doing it the way that everybody else was doing it. But I did have this degree in my pocket, which was handy. And I guess when I was a young midwife or a young student midwife, I learned an awful lot from my tutors and my mentors. And right from then, I have been absolutely convinced that it is critical to have excellent educators, and whether they're in the classroom or whether they're in the clinical area. And I still remember what some of these wonderful people that looked after me said to me. And this applies whether you're a nurse or a midwife. One of the tutors said to us one day, she said, when you're a midwife, you have to be competent. You have to, as far as is possible, give safe care. But you also have to be compassionate and kind. And she said to us that the interesting thing to her was you could actually survive as a midwife if you weren't all that competent, but you couldn't survive as a midwife if you weren't kind and compassionate. She did, however, stress that we needed to be both. And interestingly, that really stuck with me. You can be the most competent nurse, midwife, doctor, but if you can't form relationships with the people for whom you're caring, and if you aren't kind, and if you don't care about them, you might as well not bother, because you will come a cropper, and you will come a cropper particularly today, when more and more and more the relationship matters. And I have seen midwives who've got into significant difficulty clinically, and things have gone wrong for families, for women, for their babies. But because the midwife has been kind and compassionate, excuse me, things have actually worked out for the best in the end. And I took that into my working life, this issue of kindness and compassion. And when I used to interview new midwives for positions when I was the director of midwifery at King's, what I used to say to them, and I really did mean it, that I wish them all the best in the workplace. What I required of them was to be kind. I would absolutely help them, support them, forgive them, if that's the right word, if something went wrong clinically. But what I couldn't forgive was lack of kindness. And funnily enough, just not a few weeks ago, somebody came up to me at a conference and said they could remember me saying that to them, and it had really stuck with them. So that's just one of my messages from today, is just remember to be kind and compassionate throughout your career. And many things will be better because of that. And I would add to that, to be kind and compassionate to the people you work with, not just your women or patients, depending whether you're a nurse or a midwife, because one of the things I've found throughout my career is that you kind of get what you put in. And I have found that when I've been friendly, welcoming, kind to people, they give it back to me. And there's that sort of thing about goodness generating goodness. And I kind of learned as a young student to look out for the people I admired and watch them and learn from them. And there were other people around, and you'll all have met them, who you just think, I'm not enjoying being with them. Just don't become like them. Become like the people that have inspired you. I've worked with hugely inspiring people. I mean, one of the mentors I had as a community midwife, she was just wonderful to the women and the babies. She would go anywhere for them. She would be on call for them. She would let them ring her up for any little thing. And, you know, because she was so good to them, they didn't exploit her. They didn't ring her all the time, but they did call her when they needed her. And she was brilliant at forming relationships. And I also worked with a very difficult senior midwife on the labour ward once. Difficult because she was fierce. She was quite a terrifying human being. But when something was wrong, she was there supporting you and looking after you. And another person who really sticks with me is someone who was a head of midwifery at a big London hospital. And one of the things she did, and I'm sorry, I've meant to go linearly through my career, but I'm not managing that. I'm going off at tangents, but never mind. This woman, actually, I don't mind saying she was Joan Greenwood was her name. And she's a great friend of mine now. She's quite elderly. But what happened was I was working as a young midwife at a London hospital, and I wanted to do a course called the Advanced Diploma in Midwifery. And I went off to my head of midwifery at the time and said, could I go off and do this course? And it meant I had to have half a day off a week during term time. And the head of midwifery said, no, I couldn't go off and do it. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll write to every single head of midwifery in London and say, this is me, this is what I want to do. Will you have me in your service? And the only head of midwifery who wrote back to me was this lovely woman, Joan Greenwood. And what she said to me is, come and see me. So off I went to see her. I talked about what I wanted to do, this course, and I wanted to do the course because I wanted to become a midwife teacher, and you had to have the advanced diploma in midwifery before you could become a midwife teacher. And she said, right, you can come and work with me. But before you make your decision, I want you to meet my group of midwife teachers. And she took me off to meet her 4 midwife teachers, because at that stage, midwifery education was in the hospitals. And I met these 4 women who were just marvelous, fantastically interesting people. And I said, I definitely want to come and work with you. And it was one of the best moves in my career. I went back to tell my other head of midwifery that I was leaving. And she said, but you can't leave. I would have let you go on the course. And I said, but you said I couldn't. So I wasn't going to be put off. And now I've got a new job. Sorry, I'm going. So the point about that little story, or rather long story, is that Joan Greenwood was just one of these wonderful people who did what I think is commonly known as nurture people. And she really nurtured me. But, you know, I sought her out. I wasn't going to have no as an answer to something I wanted to do. And I would really encourage you throughout your careers, if you decide you want to do something, find a way of doing it, and do not be put off by people who say no. Find a yes person, or a I'll think about it person. And one of the things I've tried to do throughout my career, and I hope you will try to do this too, is say yes rather than no. Say, let's try it. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it's possible, rather than, oh no, we couldn't possibly do that here. And I'm saying this to you when you're still students, and you might think, well, you know, how can we put that into action? But remember, you'll be meeting patients, you'll be meeting women, and you will be in the position as the person giving their care to open up opportunities for them or close them down. You know, let's take a situation in midwifery. You know, you've got a woman who's perhaps obese and she wants to do something that you wouldn't normally say that was a very good idea for someone who's got obesity. But maybe it's possible. She really wants to have a water birth, for example. Maybe you can go with her to discuss it with the consultant obstetrician. Maybe it's possible as long as some other safety mechanisms are put in place. So this business about being a person who thinks about possibility and opportunity rather than somebody who shuts things down is, I think, really important. So it's critical that we have good tutors, mentors, supporters around us, and hopefully you've got that. If you haven't, you'll seek them out and you will watch the people who do that well and try and emulate their behaviour in the future. I think that's really important. So what else did I learn as a young midwife that maybe is relevant to you as people going through your training, or indeed who are about to start to work as nurses and midwives? I suppose taking accountability is important as a nurse and a midwife, and having the courage to do that. And some of the best practitioners I've seen don't shrink away from accountability and are courageous. And perhaps the best illustration of that story is, of what I mean by that, is I worked with a fantastic midwife called Kate. She's now called Kate Jackson. She was Newson at the time. And we were working as midwife teachers, but we did a lot of clinical work at that time because, as I said before, the education was based in the clinical setting. And there wasn't much midwifery research around at that time, but a wonderful woman called Mona Romney did some very good research, randomized controlled trials, and she demonstrated that an absolutely routine practice that midwives did was actually of no benefit to women. We used to routinely shave women's perineums and give them an enema when they came in labour. And Mona Romney's work showed that it didn't reduce infection. Women still pooed at delivery, and it led to a lot of discomfort postnatally as women's perineal hair grew back. So the answer was we should stop doing it. But at that time, the women were kind of under the control of the obstetricians. And so it wasn't absolutely clear cut how we could just stop doing this. So this wonderful midwife, Kate, said she was going to sort it out. And she wrote to every single obstetrician, there were 6 of them, enclosed the research and said, the midwives at the hospital we were working at have read this research and we're not going to do this routine practice anymore. 5 of the obstetricians wrote back and said, great, this research is brilliant. 1 of them wrote back and said, no, my women still have to be shaved and given enemas, and you can't stop doing this. So we all kind of looked at Kate and said, oh, what do we do now? And she said, I'll write again to him. So she wrote to him and said, dear Mr. whoever it was, if you want this to happen, you have to come back and do it. You'll have to do it yourself because the midwives aren't going to do it. And so the practice stopped, because obviously he wasn't going to come and do it himself. He was just being a nuisance. So that's taking accountability for midwifery practice. It's also having the courage to change practice. And I think we need more nurses and midwives who take accountability, who say, we're not doing the right thing here, and we will try and change the practice. Now, changing practice is not always easy, but if you work at it and you persist with it, you can. And interestingly, from the nursing point of view, I'm a non-executive director now in a trust, and I am so impressed at what the nurses are doing, particularly for patients with dementia. And just things like, letting pets come into the ward, letting visitors be there 24/7, making the facilities right for visitors. What a difference that can make to the care of people with dementia. And yet there are still units where that's not happening. So you, as a newly qualified nurse, if you have courage and you take accountability for your practice, you can gradually make changes. And I think it's really important to remember that. Now, I'm going to run out of time. So I hope that's given you some pointers for things that you should carry on doing. I suppose what I want to say when I finish is that it's a tough profession. Nursing and midwifery can be tough, but I do want to say that I think it's a fantastic time to be going out there into these professions. The policy is brilliant. I've just mentioned about how we're changing care for people with dementia. There is so much fantastic policy around about all sorts of how do we look after people with particular disease conditions. Institutions are opening up. They're starting to welcome in carers and relatives. And it's a different world from when I was a young, newly qualifying nurse and midwife. And the policy is brilliant for midwifery particularly, that's what I know about, but also for cancer care, for mental health care, and so on. And the money has been a problem, but look what's just happened. This potential new settlement for the NHS means it isn't going to be quite so bad in the period when you're coming out and qualified. So be optimistic. You may not be absolutely loving where you're working, but there is somewhere that will be fabulous to work and where you can have a wonderful time. But find people who will get you through the difficult periods. I've had some difficult periods. The worst was when I got absolutely pilloried and was on the front page of the Daily Mail for 2 days and the inside page for 2 more days, because I led the RCM campaign, which was to decriminalise abortion. And I absolutely got into the biggest trouble of my life over that. I was called all sorts of terrible things. All I was trying to do was give women choice and say we should trust women to make their decisions and not control their reproductive choices. So in my head, it was simple, but what the flack I experienced was horrible. But I got through it. And I got through it because I have set up throughout my career friends. I've got the most fabulous family who support me. And I've worked with people that have been really good supportive teams to me. And that's what you need to do in your own careers, is get people round you who will look after you when the going gets tough, who'll keep you on the road and say, this, help you get over it. And try and have a life outside of nursing and midwifery. I go off up to Scotland and climb mountains, and it's a real head clearer. I cycle my bike to work, and that allows you to unwind. People say that having a dog or some other pet is absolutely fabulous in terms of resilience. So it's a brilliant career. You can have such fun. I've had such fun. You've got so many opportunities, but it won't all be a piece of cake because you're looking after people, and it's a tough thing to do. So you need your support mechanisms in place. So set them up now. Thank you. Over to Sophie. I should have said that.
Well, thank you so much, Cathy. Wouldn't you agree that was an amazing session? We really appreciate your honesty and your insight. And some key takeaways for me and for yourselves is the benefits and the value of having a strong support network around you, especially during your career as you're starting off as a midwife or a nurse. Of course, you guys know that the Florence Nightingale Mentoring Programme is available for King's students and recent graduates to join. If you'd like to join and find yourself a mentor, potentially even Professor Cathy Warwick yourself, simply just click on the link below and sign up. And we'd like to say thank you and bye on behalf of King's College. Bye then.